They opened the gates to D'Angelo's mansion, and the world seemed to hold its breath. What lay beyond wasn't just a decaying house swallowed by dust and silence. It was a vault of a soul, a space still echoing with his breath, his music, and his final words. Inside were forgotten tapes, never heard recordings, and a matchbox-sized device pointing toward a truth darker than death itself, a truth that could chill anyone who dared to listen. This is no longer just a story about music. It's about the cost of freedom, the shadow of betrayal, and the echo of a genius trapped between sound and silence. Before we uncover this haunting legacy, don't forget to like and subscribe, because what follows is more than history. It's a confession carved in rhythm and fear. No one ever understood why D'Angelo's mansion was so utterly silent. It wasn't peace, it was suffocating, as though every wall was guarding a secret too heavy to speak. Even from the road leading up the hill, people could feel it, the air thick and heavy, the afternoon light breaking through the trees like hesitant fingers brushing the glass of a tomb. The house stood alone, proud yet weary, an exhausted witness to time. It had been months since D'Angelo passed, but his home, his studio, the birthplace of songs that once haunted generations, remained untouched, frozen mid-breath. People said the house never used to sleep. At night, you could still hear faint rhythms from the basement, half-finished riffs, a drum topping, D'Angelo humming softly as though still chasing perfection. But after he died, everything stopped. Only one man ever entered again, the estate executor, an old friend. He came one misty morning, the key trembling in his hand as if caught by a phantom breeze. The door creaked open, releasing the scent of damp wood, old leather, and something faintly smoky, ash and incense mixed with memory. The living room was untouched. A framed photo of D'Angelo at the Voodoo launch in 2000 hung over an old Fender Rhodes piano. Beneath it, a note read, "Don't erase this one, my best take." No one knew what recording he meant, or if it still existed. Light filtered through the curtains like fading sunset. On the table lay a discolored envelope, the handwriting clear but trembling. "They're listening, even when I'm silent." Those words hit like a whisper from beyond. Who were they? And why would the man who once said music was his freedom leave behind such a warning? The executor felt a shiver, not of fear, but recognition. It was as if D'Angelo himself had leaned close and breathed in his ear. They never stopped listening. Rumors swirled among those who'd worked with him. Engineers spoke of his paranoia, how he once fled a studio session saying, "I have to listen to my house again." No one knew what that meant. Others mentioned a locked room in his basement, a place D'Angelo called the Hole. He'd disappear into it for hours, re-emerging pale and shaken, as though exorcising demons. No one had proof that room existed, but among Richmond's musicians, the story was legend. D'Angelo, born in 1974 to a preacher father and choir singer mother, grew up surrounded by gospel, organ chords, and faith. You could hear it in his music, the ache of belief and defiance intertwined. "I don't write music to be famous," he once said. "I write to escape." What he was running from, only his music could answer. The sliding notes, the breaks, the gasps that sounded like a man fighting invisible chains. In his final days, those around him noticed a change. He spoke less, stared longer. "He was hearing something I couldn't hear," one assistant recalled. He said, "They record me even when I'm not singing." Everyone laughed, until they read the letter found in the mansion. The executor explored room by room. A small altar stood in one corner, his mother's photo beside a wooden cross. Opposite it, shelves lined with tapes and half-written lyrics. On the wall, a self-portrait, its eyes blacked out with paint. Finally, he descended to the basement. A dim yellow bulb flickered overhead. The final door, rumored to hide the Hole, was locked tight, sealed with an iron padlock. The key was missing. He struck it once. The echo rolled through the room like a drumbeat. For a moment, he felt eyes in the dark. "They're listening," he thought. Later, when he finally forced it open, he discovered the iron cabinet behind the wall. The air that escaped was freezing. Inside were reels of tape, leather notebooks, and a small USB wrapped in black velvet. The label read, "Voice Unheard." He hesitated, then played the first tape. Static. A breath. Then D'Angelo's voice, trembling and low. "I'm trapped inside what they built for me." No music, no background, just confession. The second tape began with a fragile piano melody. D'Angelo's voice again. "They said I'd be free if I signed, but freedom ain't a word on paper." Each word cut deep. The executor remembered how fiercely D'Angelo had fought to own his sound, to write, play, and produce everything himself. But to the industry, his autonomy was a product, not a principle. The notebook beside the tapes contained a single line. "If violence is freedom, maybe I'll stop singing." Tears pricked the executor's eyes. He remembered how D'Angelo would sometimes hit record and stand in silence for minutes. When asked why, he'd said, "In the silence, I know who's really here with me." Everyone assumed he meant God. Maybe he didn't. He plugged in the USB. The file inside, track 0, unfinished. A buzz. Then that weary, soulful voice again. "You can't own the spirit of a song." But they tried. They took my sound, my breath, even my silence. A single wrong piano note, a hollow laugh, then nothing. Just a low hum that never faded. The executor's pulse quickened. Maybe D'Angelo wasn't just talking about fame. Maybe he was exposing the system that fed on him. Contracts, control, exploitation. He thought of D'Angelo's decade of mysterious silence. Maybe he hadn't disappeared. Maybe his voice had been held hostage. In the back of the cabinet lay a sealed envelope marked, "Do not open until the echoes stop." Inside, one note. "If you find this, listen again." He replayed the first tape. This time, under the static, he heard something else. Another voice, mechanical, haunting, blending with D'Angelo's. It wasn't human. D'Angelo had once warned of machines imitating soul. When the heart leaves the sound, he said, music dies. Maybe he had witnessed that death in real time. In the dark basement, the silence wasn't silence anymore. It was surveillance. Behind another wall, he found a hidden iron door. Inside, an even smaller room. On the floor, an old phone with one file. Final call, 3 a.m. He played it. Long silence. Then D'Angelo's voice. "If I don't finish this, they'll lose control of the sound. But what if that sound kills me?" Another man's voice answered softly. "You're overthinking it, D." D'Angelo laughed, a sound full of despair. "You don't understand. It hears me, even when I'm not playing." The recording cut off with a sharp beep. Pinned to the wall was a photo of D'Angelo in the studio. Behind him, the same white wall mentioned in the tape. At its base, a faint scratch. The executor pried at it until a small metal object fell out. A matchbox-sized recorder with an inscription, "For the ones who never listened." He opened it. Hundreds of sound files appeared. Short clips of breathing, footsteps, the creak of a chair. In one, D'Angelo whispered, "Stop listening." The recording had been recording him for years without activation. It was always on. The realization struck hard. This wasn't just paranoia. D'Angelo had lived and died inside a cage that listened. Then, as he examined the files, a new one appeared by itself. LastListen.mp3. He pressed play. Static. Then a whisper impossibly close. "You finally found it, didn't you? Don't let them bury this one too." The executor's blood ran cold. It wasn't coincidence. D'Angelo had known someone would find this. Maybe that was his final song. Not a melody, but a message. He left the basement trembling, but something kept pulling him back. Upstairs, in the legacy room, he found a wax-sealed envelope labeled, "To be opened if I'm gone." Inside, unsigned contracts, a gray velvet pouch, and a USB drive marked "The Last Take." He pressed play. Soft piano. Then D'Angelo's weary voice. "They told me it was just illness, but when the music stopped, they turned the volume up to everything." He spoke about treatments delayed for shows and of being forced to perform despite pain. "If I stop, they lose money. To them, my body's just a clause in a contract." In the notes, one line stood out in red ink. "Every note they sold took something from me." The recording shifted. His breathing slowed. Then,